House of the Dragon Episode 10 has just released on HBO Max, and in this episode, we get the final straw in the battle between peace and war. An incident with dragons has left Rhaenyra no choice but to turn to revenge, with both the Greens and Blacks close to a very brutal collision. In this spoiler review and analysis, I'm going to be breaking down and giving you my thoughts on the House of the Dragon Season 1 finale, entitled The Black Queen. Before I get into it though, if you want to see more topical videos on the end of Season 1 and more on Game of Thrones in the time ahead, then don't forget to support this upload by giving it a like rating, subscribing to the channel, turning on your notifications, and following me on social media via the links in the description. But without further ado, let's dive into my review and breakdown for House of the Dragon Episode 10. So as the tension has increased in recent weeks on House of the Dragon, we expected that the civil war between the Targaryens would soon begin. The rulers of Westeros disregarded the late king's wish for his firstborn daughter to succeed him on the Iron Throne in favour of his eldest son Aegon, but some were loyal to Rhaenyra and wanted to keep the oath they pledged. And with Rhaenys heading straight back to Dragonstone to inform the Black Queen of what has happened in the days since she left, tension is going to reach an all-time high when it comes to both the Greens and the Blacks. But war isn't the thing that Rhaenyra turns to right at the beginning, and she has a lot of different problems to deal with right from the outset of this final episode. The episode starts with Rhaenyra talking to Luke about Corlys being unwell, and she tries to put his mind at ease surrounding him being the heir to the Driftmark throne. He doesn't want it and mentions that Selena should have been the successor, but Rhaenyra reminds him of how she had to take up the responsibility of being the future queen even though she didn't want it. But it's then that things start to get bad as Rhaenys soon lands on Dragonstone, and she is the one to deliver the news of Viserys' death and Aegon's coronation as king, which sends Rhaenyra into an early labour. Rhaenyra giving birth is spread out over a few scenes, with the Queen attended by a group of midwives and the Maester. This is intercut with Daemon making Sir Lawrence Marbrand and Sir Steffon Darklyn swear to Rhaenyra's side, and a moment where Steffon also trains Jace and Luke on the shore of Dragonstone, where we see Jace trying to get his brother to fight back. But they are soon interrupted by Rhaenys, who tells the boys that their mother wants to speak to them. Once they are there, they see the state she is in, and they are told what has happened in King's Landing, and Jace is rightfully quite angry. His mother makes him swear not to retaliate and says that she will weigh in after giving birth, with Jake echoing this onto Daemon, who Rhaenyra equally expects to be furious at the recent news. So at the minute, Rhaenyra is really trying to hold things together and not have the realm transition into chaos until she can know more about what's happened. This is where Rhaenyra's birth scene comes fully into focus, and just like in the books, she gives birth to a dragon-like child that has sadly passed away. It's quite a reflection on the first episode of the series, with her mother and her son having died in childbirth. And while Rhaenyra doesn't die here, it is still quite the brutal symbolism of what might happen in the time ahead, and one that's also a reflection of how this particular episode ends too. It communicates the death of both parent and child in this civil war, and that there will really be no winners if this transpires the way it has been as of late. It's a tragic yet gruesome scene that is clearly elevated by the news that was brought to Rhaenyra just before. And this eventually leads into the coronation of the Black Queen and the funeral of her child, who was going to be called Visenya. During the crowning of Rhaenyra as their queen, Sir Eric shows up, kneels before her, and reveals that he has stolen Viserys' crown, one that she will now wear. Last week we saw Aegon crowned with Aegon the Conqueror's crown, so it's only fitting that Rhaenyra has her father's, following the treason that she learnt of. So again, a reflection is created between episode 9 and 10, both having someone crowned, and both including those who are fighting to stop war, in the midst of those who want to react in the reverse. After last week's Green Council scenes, we also get the Black's version of that in episode 10, with the first of 2 Black Councils, and present in the room at the time is Rhaenyra, Daemon, Rhaenys, Sir Stefan, Jace, Luke, Eric, Sir Lawrence, and other unnamed council members. We see the printed table map of Westeros that's lit, the same one that was shown in the official trailer from before. Nothing seems very hopeful between them, with those wanting to react to the treason that went down in King's Landing. What changes this for the time being, though, is the return of Corlys Velaryon, who we knew had been suffering with an illness after fighting in the Stepstones. He is told by Rhaenys about what happened to his brother, and he soon realises that the best way to aid in this potential war is to support Rhaenyra's cause so that chaos doesn't consume everyone involved. He attends the Black Council, swears fealty to Rhaenyra, and this in turn helps everyone in the room to be behind her for the time being. He calls her the princess and says that all of his ships and assets are now hers too. We learn that while Rhaenyra and Rhaenys have had a bit of a tense relationship following the situation with their son Laenor, Rhaenys does respect that she demonstrates the restraint to go to war while everyone else wants to do the reverse. Again, it's something that mirrors this episode to the last one with Alicent, as Otto wants to eliminate the Blacks, while the Queen at King's Landing would rather give Rhaenyra the chance to follow fair terms. But coming back to the Black Council, after Corlys declares to fight for the Blacks and support Rhaenyra, the Sea Snake reveals to her that they have cut the capital's sea supply due to him now controlling it after conquering the Stepstones. This does help calm the situation and give them an advantage if things do get worrying, but it's clear that while Rhaenyra's plan is to be slow and steady in this potential conflict, that there are still those who want their retaliation now. Daemon is one of those who feels that way, but again, the words of the Velaryons help to at least put this on hold for a short period. And speaking of Daemon, he goes with Jace to talk with the Kingsguard currently at Dragonstone, and in particular, he wants them to swear fealty to Rhaenyra. He uses Caraxes to intimidate them, and he ultimately gives them the opportunity to have a clean death over a more brutal one. But while those tensions surrounding some of the Blacks wanting to turn to war has been cut short, it begins to re-escalate once Dragonstone has a certain visitor. That visitor is Otto Hightower, who comes to the bridge of Dragonstone where he once was earlier in the season, giving us another reflection of the moment where him and Daemon previously met. After Alicent sways the Greens to offer terms to Rhaenyra, Otto is here to push forward those proposals with peace terms. And just like the scene from earlier on in the season, Rhaenyra flies in on Syrax behind Otto and his men, but this time she's wearing her father's crown. Once she lands, she rips off his Hand of the King badge, throws it away, believing him to be a traitor to both her and the memory of Viserys. Of course, Daemon wants him dead and even draws his sword during the conversation, but Otto gives Rhaenyra a page from Alicent's book, the one that they shared while they were younger. It's a reminder to Rhaenyra that Alicent knows how close the both of them were, and that, like her, she wants a peaceful resolution. This is what makes Rhaenyra stop Daemon from killing him, and she tells Otto that he will have his answer to their terms on the next day. Around the table, Rhaenyra lets them know the terms that Otto came to Dragonstone with, and of course, this meeting becomes more tense than the first one. A lot of them want war, while Rhaenyra is trying to hold everything together until they come up with a good plan after either agreeing or disagreeing to the terms. When things get unmanageable, Rhaenyra orders everyone in the room to get out, other than Daemon, and the two of them discuss peace and what being a good ruler means. Daemon is convinced that war with the Greens is the only solution to the arising problems and does not see an easy way out of it, similar I guess to the stance of Otto in the previous episode when he's with Alicent during the Green Council meetings. Daemon flips between being caring towards Rhaenyra and being furious at her, thinking that her push for peace is making her look like a weak leader. This is where Rhaenyra tells Daemon about Aegon's dream and the Song of Ice and Fire, thinking he knew about it, but as we know, the Viserys only ever told Rhaenyra up until his final moments when he was confused with Alicent by his bed. Daemon gets annoyed at this because Viserys never told him, and it again highlights that his brother never actually considered him as heir to the throne. Daemon says that dreams didn't make us kings, it was dragons, and continues by trying to convince her to start planning for the coming war. He even grabs her by the neck at one point, and it's a moment that truly displays both perspectives of war and peace really well, and the frustrations that different sides of the Blacks have towards this conflict. The next morning though, Rhaenyra tries to explain the importance of peace to Jace and Luke on an overlooking balcony. Jace doesn't really want what his mother does, but goes along with her wishes, and it leads to them volunteering to be sent off to both Winterfell and Storm's End to get the additional house's support. She makes the boys swear to be messengers only and not to participate in any fighting. But before we see the bloody outcome of that journey, we do get one final moment with Daemon that starts to set up another big moment from the books. Daemon goes into the Dragonmont tunnels singing a Velaryon song as Vermithor, the second biggest dragon in Westeros, awaits in the darkness. Of course, Daemon is just preparing for the eventuality of war, and he doesn't want to sit aside while Rhaenyra decides if she wants to act or not. In the earlier council scene, he did say that they had unclaimed dragons on Dragonstone, which gives them an advantage over the Greens. But with the Greens having Vhagar, the biggest of all dragons, Daemon looks to tame Vermithor so that they will have a dragon to combat that potential threat. And this brings us to the very eventful ending that really kickstarts the Dance of the Dragons. Luke lands on Storm's End only to find Aemond already there, talking with Lord Boros Baratheon, the rude and loud lord who reveals to Luke that Aemond has come with a marriage proposal to one of his daughters. He snaps at Luke saying, "Which of my girls would you marry?" and Luke refuses to participate now that the Greens have already aligned with one of their options. Before he can leave though, Aemond insults Luke, provoking him to reach for his sword, and then Aemond aggressively walks towards him and demands that he take out his eye to settle their past issues. In turn, he takes off his eye patch and shows him the sapphire that has replaced the eye he lost. Boros stops them from getting into a nasty fight and lets Luke leave Storm's End safely. But things don't end there because Aemond goes after him through the storm, with Vhagar trying to bite Arax. It starts with Aemond chasing Luke as kind of a dominant showcase and bastard-themed insults thrown his way, but what goes wrong is that both Aemond and Luke cannot control their dragons once that bit of initial nastiness turns deadly. Dragons are tied to the emotions of their riders, and Arax sensed fear and attacked first because he thought he was cornered. And Vhagar sensed Aemond's intentions to hurt Luke, so after the attack, she just lost control, just like Aemond did over her. That loss of control ends with Vhagar biting Arax's neck, killing both Luke and his dragon. We see Aemond's reaction, and he displays an understanding to the fact that war is now inevitable, and that he is one of the main reasons for really pushing it over the edge. And this is only solidified by the scene that follows, as Daemon informs Rhaenyra of Luke's death in a current meeting, and from her reaction, we see that she truly has war on her mind now. She tried to go the way of peace, just like Alicent did in the last episode, but as we learn by the end of this finale, there is no chance of stopping the Dance of Dragons. So what are my overall thoughts on the final episode of House of the Dragon Season 1? Well, episode 10 is a somewhat mirror to episode 9, and just like the previous two entries, we really focus on the standout performance of a certain character. While episode 8 showed us the emotional final days of Viserys in trying to keep his families together, episode 9 showed Alicent's struggles to keep peace even after believing the late king's wishes to have Aegon be king during his confusion. It's the small things that built up the tension, and it all led to today's episode, which included the big moment to kickstart this war. The Black Queen shows us Rhaenyra trying to keep the realm together, preferring peace over war, but by the end, with her son having been killed and the early news of the Greens pushing her into an early labour, she cannot forgive. We really see the anger in her eyes in that final shot, and I think it perfectly wraps up a season that is a masterclass in the building political tensions of war. They could have gone the route of Game of Thrones Season 8 and turned this story into an over-the-top blockbuster full of twists without the true execution. We saw the anger of Daenerys shown in such a light way to how we could have seen that turn, but House of the Dragon showcases Rhaenyra's turn to anger in a much more satisfying way. They really used the time this season to build characters, conflicts, and interesting relationships, showing how every figure is a shade of grey. There's no good or bad, as each character shows both sides in the arising war. It makes it much more fascinating for the viewer, even if they know that this story ends in war and bloodshed, and like say a show like Better Call Saul, it understands that a prequel show has to captivate using a set of dynamic characters and turns in their ideology. I'm going to be going into the season as a whole more in an upcoming video essay, but for now, know that I had a blast watching this first season, and I couldn't be happier with the way it turned out. House of the Dragon Season 1 had mesmerising performances, high quality production, and meaningful storytelling that has the potential to build out even more in the seasons ahead. But that was my spoiler review and explained video for House of the Dragon Episode 10. I'm giving it a rating of 9 out of 10. I will be doing more videos on the show in the coming days, including a video essay on how House of the Dragon redeemed Game of Thrones on TV with its first season, so stay tuned to my channel for more breakdowns on the show. But to those who have already seen the episode, what are your thoughts on all the events that went down? What do you think will happen in Season 2? And has Season 1 really built your excitement for the rest of the series going forward? Let me know down below in the comment section. For more videos on House of the Dragon, then subscribe to the channel and turn on your notifications. Also, if you enjoyed this video, remember to leave a like rating and follow me on social media via the links in the description. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed it. I've been Cortex, and as always, make some noise.